this video, we will program the pads of the Akai MPD226 to load saved presets on a MIDI controllable pedal. This will be a standalone hardware setup with no computer connected. We'll be using a Line 6 M5 for this video, but any pedal that can receive patch changes through MIDI connections will operate in much the same way. MIDI is an acronym for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. It consists of digital data messages that allow one device to send commands to another connected through a data connection. MIDI signals are data only and never transmit audio. We need to create a connection between our devices to carry the MIDI messages from the MIDI controller to the pedal. The MPD includes adapters that convert its 8-inch MIDI ports into full-size 5-pin DIN MIDI jacks. The small end of the adapter plugs into the MIDI out port of the MPD. A standard MIDI cable will plug into the adapter and then into the 5-pin MIDI in port on the side of the M5. Now we have a physical connection that will carry commands from the MPD to the M5. It doesn't matter which preset you have loaded into the MPD when you start editing, but we will load a generic preset to give a common starting point for the purpose of the video. On the case of the MPD, the pads are numbered 1 to 16 from the bottom to the top. I want the pads to load patches 1 through 16, starting from the upper left and progressing to the right and downward. So I will be ignoring these designations in regard to how I want to use the pads, although these numbers will correspond to editing pages for each pad, so keep that in mind as we go. The MIDI specification includes 16 channels per port. New MIDI pedals pretty much always default to MIDI channel 1. But my M5 is currently set to send and receive MIDI messages on channel 5 as part of my mixing setup, where the MPD controls multiple pedals that are set to their own MIDI channels. The M5 will ignore commands transmitted on any channel other than 5, so we need to set all of the controls that we want to transmit commands to the pedal to channel 5. Each MPD preset includes 4 different pad banks, allowing the user to switch between 4 different sets of programs for the set of 16 pads without loading a different controller preset. We will use pad bank A, but you can use any bank the same way. Press the edit button to enter the programming screen and tap on the first pad on the top left, marked as pad 13 on the case label. Cursor down to MIDI channel and rotate the encoder to change the value to USB A5. Now we will move to the next pad to the right and rotate the encoder again to USB A5. We will do this for all of the other pads until they are all set to USB A5. Go back to the first pad, tap it, and cursor to the right to see the next menu. Rotate the encoder to change MIDI to DIN to on. This setting needs to be activated in order for the MPD to send MIDI commands to the MIDI out port of this standalone hardware setup. Otherwise, all commands will transmit only from the USB connection of the MPD. Again, go from pad to pad and change the MIDI to DIN setting to on for all pads. Now we have all pads routed properly to transmit commands out of the MPD to the M5 on channel 5, where they will be recognized as valid commands. MIDI program change commands are used to recall patches or presets on a device that accepts MIDI commands. Since most people use the pads of the MPD to trigger drum sounds, we need to set them to transmit program change commands instead of note messages. Go back to our top pad and tap it. Cursor left back to the first edit screen. Rotate the encoder to set the type to program change. Notice that the bottom setting has now changed to program number and defaults to value 000. Transmitting program change 0 will load patch number 1 on the M5. We will now run a quick test to make sure that we have everything set correctly on the M5 to respond properly to the MPD. The first MPD pad should load patch 1 on the M5. And there it is. Now we will go from pad to pad, changing the type to program change. We will now cursor down to program number and program each pad to trigger the patch that we want it to respond to. The second pad will be 001, the third pad 002, and so on. We will now verify that everything is set correctly by tapping each pad and making sure that the preset number of the M5 changes in sequence. This setup is useful in a studio setting where it can be helpful to be able to quickly browse through programs to find the type of effect for a particular need. It could also be helpful in a live setting where there may be a need to change patches between songs for specific sounds. To save our new settings and rename our MPD preset, press the Preset button and cursor to the right to enter the save screen. Cursor down to preset name and use the encoder and cursor buttons to set the new name. I will keep it simple and name the patch M5. Press the encoder to save. Subscribe to Dub Seekers for our upcoming video on programming the knobs, buttons, and faders to control effects on the fly. Thanks for watching.